Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Hey guys, welcome to Just Nicolas Cage, in which I very slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. Today we're looking at Snake Eyes. No, we're not talking about some G.I. Joe bullshit, we're talking about the 1998 Brian De Palma thriller. So Snake Eyes takes place on the night of a big boxing match where attendants include dirty cop Nicolas Cage and his childhood best friend Navy Commander Gary Sinise, who's there to protect the Secretary of Defense. Well, the Secretary of Defense gets assassinated and the assassin gets killed, but Cage spots a few mysterious loose ends and things that don't quite add up, and he conducts an investigation into what really went on. So let's talk about Brian De Palma. I mean, the man has a hell of a filmography. He's directed some big iconic films like Scarface, Untouchables, Carlito's Way, and Carrie. But he's also responsible for a bunch of cool, smaller-scale, sleazy, Hitchcockian thrillers, like Sisters, Obsession, Dressed to Kill, Body Double, and Blowout. He's been accused of being misogynistic because he almost always has women as the victims getting chopped up, to which he responded, "I'm making suspense movies, what else is gonna happen to them?" Which I can only assume didn't go well with the feminists that were criticizing him. And his films have also been criticized as being too derivative of Hitchcock, in terms of certain plot points and imagery and the way he builds suspense. I see him more so as a guy who just picked up the torch where Hitchcock left off. His movies do often borrow from stuff like Vertigo and Rear Window and Psycho. But De Palma takes advantage of the fact that he can get away with stuff that Hitchcock couldn't. Like, I don't think Hitchcock could have ever had a scene where a woman gets mutilated by a long-ass drill. I think the tagline to Raising Cain kind of sums up Brian De Palma. Demented, deranged, deceptive, De Palma. I personally like De Palma a lot. He might have a sleaze factor, and oftentimes his movies are style over substance. But he's made some really cool movies, and I think the one thing that his biggest critics can't deny is that the man knows how to work a camera in a masterful way. I recently watched that documentary De Palma, and realized that he truly is a visual storyteller. And he's responsible for some incredible shots. You also have to acknowledge the impact that him and his films have had over the years. I mean, Tarantino worships the guy.
Brian De Palma's Blowout. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's Brian De Palma's finest film. All right, which means it's one of the finest movies ever made, because as we all know, Brian De Palma is the greatest director of his generation.
And did you know that Brian De Palma is the one that introduced Robert De Niro to Scorsese? And did you know that Brian De Palma rewrote the opening text scroll in Star Wars? Not to mention the impact that his films have had on hip-hop and video games. If you're looking for recommendations on Brian De Palma movies that aren't the big famous ones, Blowout is a cool thriller with a great premise. John Travolta is a sound technician that accidentally records audio that unveils a political assassination conspiracy. It's good and it's got a great ending. Another relatively obscure Brian De Palma movie I like is Phantom of the Paradise. It's a horror comedy rock opera that feels heavily inspired by Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it actually came out a year before Rocky Horror. It's about deals with the devil and there's heavy satire of the music industry. And Paul Williams plays an asshole music producer, and he also wrote all the music and lyrics and performed a bunch of the songs. It's a really fun time. So to sum up Brian De Palma, he's a master of outrageous over-the-top spectacle, but he also demonstrates an underlying masterful detail to the craft. And when I say it like that, I guess it's a no-brainer that Brian De Palma eventually wrote and directed a movie starring Nicolas Cage, which brings me nicely onto Snake Eyes. You can definitely feel Brian De Palma's presence while watching Snake Eyes. Firstly, the movie involves a political conspiracy and an assassination in which a witness uses technology to uncover the mystery, which is essentially the plot to Blowout. But also the camera tricks are very De Palma. There's a split-screen sequence which De Palma has used loads of times before. There's also use of POV which he used in the opening scene to Blowout, and he uses it really well in Snake Eyes. I love the way he transitions out of the first person via a mirror. It's a really cool trick. Another technique that Brian De Palma likes to use is a long take Steadicam sequence, and boy does this movie have a doozy of a long take. The movie kicks off with a 13-minute long scene all seemingly done in one take, and it's really impressive. It's hard to convey how cool this is on an edited YouTube video because obviously I'm not going to show it all, but you kind of just have to experience it all together. You're just watching it going, how have they still not cut yet? I can't get through one sentence without doing a bunch of jump cuts. Upon closer inspection, there are a handful of sneaky cuts every time the camera spins around, but they're hidden well and it's sliced together seamlessly. It's a great way to kick off the movie, and it introduces all the key players and locations that come into play later. The scene takes place during a boxing match where you don't see the boxing. It only shows the crowd's reactions, which is a cool idea. It kind of reminded me of the opening scene from Boogie Nights and Robert Altman's The Player, which I consider two of the best long take sequences I've ever seen, and this scene is up there with them. And I just realized that Luis Guzman is in the track and shot part of Boogie Nights and Snake Eyes, so shout out to him. And it's not the only impressive shot in the film. There's another great part where Gary Sinise is on one side of the door, and the camera pans up to a bird's eye view, and then it keeps moving and we get a look into all the other rooms. And once again, it looks like one take. It's a cool trick and it feeds into De Palma's recurring themes of surveillance and voyeurism. Like with most Brian De Palma movies, there certainly are Hitchcockian elements to it, but the inspiration that seemed most apparent to me is Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon. Rashomon deals with the event being told through flashbacks by different witnesses. And Snake Eyes does that too. 3 times we see key events through the eyes of other characters, and sometimes literally through their eyes via POV. It's fun to see snippets of events that you saw before but from a different angle. And for the most part, the retelling of the events doesn't get repetitive, which is a tricky thing to pull off. I am a sucker for that whole contradictory accounts being told via flashbacks trope. I mentioned Rashomon, but another classic motion picture that utilizes the structure that comes to mind is Hoodwinked, and it was done well there too. But yeah, the mystery is a fun element to Snake Eyes, and clearly there's a whole neo-noir vibe going on. You got the stormy night, the detective, the mysterious dame. So the movie sucked me in with that opening 13 minutes. And then it goes into this cool mystery Rashomon thing, and I was digging it. And then about 40 minutes into the movie, a major plot twist is revealed. And here is where I started to lose interest. Because it just felt like way too early in the film to give that away. You just essentially told the audience the answer to the mystery and there's like 50 minutes left. Brian De Palma has defended this, saying that it's not supposed to be a whodunit and the movie is meant to be more about human relationships. But I still think it was a mistake. Especially because the exploration into the characters' relationships isn't executed well enough to justify it. And the actual twist itself is kind of underwhelming too. So around about the middle of the movie, I just kind of checked out and stopped giving a shit. And the back half of this film is just a bunch of cliche stuff and uninteresting exposition. And the way the movie wraps up is a mess too. When I saw it, I was like, did I miss something? And turns out, yeah, something was missing. In the original ending of the movie, a tidal wave was going to play a big part in the climax. It was going to knock a big globe thing into the villain and kill them. And I guess Nicolas Cage was going to get swept under the water and survive. Brian De Palma kind of explained it as like the tidal wave represents this like act of God, like a Noah's Ark thing, washing away all the sin.
And the concept that Dave and I had is that when you're dealing with such corruption, you need God to come down and blow it all away. It's the only thing that works.
Which is actually kind of a cool idea. But I guess it didn't go over well at test screening, so the producers made him change it. But the problem is, taking the tidal wave out left a big hole in the film. And I don't just mean the absence of an exciting climax. I mean it literally caused plot holes and continuity errors. First off, the whole movie feels like it's building up to that big globe ball thing having a payoff. It's literally the first image of the movie, and they show it a bunch of times. And when it gets loose, they make a big deal out of it.
As you can see behind me, the huge metal globe that is the emblem of the Powell Millennium lies shattered.
But then nothing happens with it. It's like having a Chekhov's gun where the gun doesn't go off. It's very unsatisfying. Another issue is that there is a part in the movie where you can see a tidal wave smash into a police van and knock it on its side. And then literally 1 second later, the van is fine like nothing happened. But the most jarring part is where Nicolas Cage says,
Keep dreaming I'm back in that tunnel. Underwater. Only in my dream, I drowned.
At no point in the finished version of the movie is Nicolas Cage underwater in a tunnel. That's from the deleted ending, so you're just watching it going, what the hell is he talking about? So let's talk about Nicolas Cage's performance. For a decent chunk of the movie, Nicolas Cage is very entertaining. I mean, look at the way he's introduced.
It's like shit. I'm on TV. I'm on TV. Hi, Rick Santoro. Hello, Richard Santoro. I'm Ricky!
Cage hits the ground running at the start of the film, and he's fueled by what I can only describe as a cocaine-like energy.
Go Tyler! Go Tyler! Go Tyler! Go! Go Tyler! Go Tyler! Go Tyler! Whoa! Lincoln Tyler! Lincoln Tyler! Lincoln! Ow!
He is on fire and he's having a blast, and it is a delight.
Yeah, Lincoln! Yeah, baby! Go, baby! Yeah!
Cage is rocking this snazzy yellow shirt at the start, and it sets the tone of, you know, he's a wild card. I was hoping that he'd wear the shirt the whole movie, and I was kind of disappointed to see that he changed out of it into a plain shirt and tie early on. And as his attire becomes more drab and conventional, unfortunately, so does his performance. You know how they say that Star Trek The Next Generation only started getting good once Riker grew a beard and started looking cool? Well, it's kind of the opposite here, where Nicolas Cage starts looking less cool and the movie and his performance get a bit boring. Nicolas Cage kind of just starts to mellow out after the first half an hour, and his performance gets a little bit dull.
Kevin, you're talking to your best friend.
And loyalty's my only vice. So what's the problem?
I described his energy at the start as being cocaine-like, which admittedly I guess you could say about most Nicolas Cage performances, but it really seems to be a conscious choice here. And at the end of the movie it pretty much does confirm that the character is a cocaine user. And the movie does play out in real time. So maybe it is intentional that after like 30 minutes of high energy he gets a bit sluggish and tired, because that's what happens when cocaine wears off. Or so I've heard, yeah, not that I would know. I haven't seen this interpretation anywhere that this is actually the story of a man trying to solve a murder while coming down off of cocaine. But I just love that theory so much that I'm gonna assume that's what's going on. And that piece of headcanon actually made me like this movie a bit more. But also, if I had a choice, I'd prefer Nicolas Cage to be that coked up for the whole movie. It would have made the boring parts more exciting. His character is quite compelling though. Cage is playing a real asshole here. He's taking bribes, cheating on his wife, but somehow he's not completely hateable, which is a testament to Nicolas Cage. I even like the way his arc resolved at the end. The other performances are fine too. Carla Gugino is fine with what she has, I just wish she was developed a little bit more. It's also nice to see Gary Sinise in such a big role. In the 90s he was in loads of stuff, but I feel like I don't see him in movies anymore. Except when Shea Wiggum pops up in the movie, because it always takes me a few minutes to realize that that's not Gary Sinise. The movie hinges a lot on Cage and Sinise's friendship. We're constantly told that they're close childhood friends, but we don't see enough of it to be invested. I think more time setting up their friendship would have helped. Gary Sinise is good though. He keeps the later parts of the movie kind of watchable, and there's a monologue near the end that he delivers quite well. Overall, this movie is kind of hard to evaluate. You know, it's too good to call it bad, it's too bad to call it good, and it's too good and bad to call mediocre. I don't know what to call it. When a movie has a mediocre first hour with a great third act, you can at least go, oh, stick with it, man, it really pays off. But when a movie starts off good and then goes downhill, you're kind of just left with the memory of the downhill parts at the end. The bad elements of Snake Eyes aren't overtly terrible or even like fun bad where you can make fun of it. The biggest problems lie in the script. It's cliche and it's messy, and ultimately that led to me not really caring about most of the events transpiring at the end. But I also can't dismiss this movie entirely, because the parts that work really do work. I really did love that Brian De Palma camera work. The mystery is fun initially, and you have some fantastic Nicolas Cage moments. It just doesn't pay off in a satisfying way. I highly recommend watching the movie for that opening shot, and then feel free to turn off the movie at any point after that. So the next movie that Nicolas Cage did is 8mm, so until next time guys, thanks for watching.